Welcome you all for a critical analysis of Towards a Feminist Poetics by Elaine Showalter. Elaine Showalter. Born in 1941, Showalter is an American feminist critic, educationalist, and social commentator. Showalter has made considerable contributions to the evolution of feminist criticism by her groundbreaking work, A Literature of Their Own, subtitled as Women Writers from Bronte to Leslie, published in the year 1977. Showalter's feminist criticism is a clearly articulated feminist literary theory. She has proposed a separate and independent model of feminist literary theory by rejecting the inevitability of male models and theories. She also recalls the history of women's writing to the present. Showalter has written and edited numerous books and articles focused on a variety of subjects on feminist literary criticism. Her best-known works include Towards a Feminist Poetics, published in the year 1979, Feminist Criticism in the Wilderness, published in the year 1981, The Female Melody, published in the year 1985. In the essay Towards a Feminist Poetics, Showalter advocates or supports a new way of reading. Showalter acknowledges that feminist criticism is perhaps the most isolated and least understood school of criticism in 1970s. According to Showalter, there are two reasons for misunderstanding feminist criticism: patriarchal suspicion about feminist literary criticism and a lack of a fully articulated theory that guide feminist criticism. Showalter divides feminist criticism into two sections: feminist critique, exposing woman as a reader; gynocritics, presenting woman as a writer. Let me expand the term woman as a reader. In the simplest sense, feminist critique is a thorough analysis of male writings from a feminist perspective. In this concept, woman is considered as the consumer of literature produced by male writers. She calls it as male-produced literature because it is evolved from male-constructed literary history and is male-orientated. Showalter says that a female reading may change our idea of a given text. Showalter thus calls this kind of analysis the feminist critique. For example, Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypt at the time of Julius Caesar, has been treated differently by Shakespeare and Bernard Shaw. Bernard Shaw gives Cleopatra's role as Caesar's adopted daughter, whereas Shakespeare considers her Caesar's concubine. The subjects of male-produced literature on female subject include stereotypes of women in literature and misconceptions about women in criticism. Thus, we are not learning what women have felt and experienced, but only what men thought women should be. The feminists thus try to trace out the images and stereotype of the women exposed in the male text. This is also called traditional feminist criticism, where women are the consumers of the production in literary writing. The second type of feminist criticism is woman as a writer or as a creator of meaning. Here in this section, woman becomes the producer of textual meaning. Woman as a writer discusses history, themes, genres, and structures of literature by women. This is in true sense the female model of writing being independent of male values and norms. As there is no particular term in English for such a branch, Elaine Showalter has adapted the French term and modified it as gynocritics. Gynocritics construct a female framework for the analysis of women's literature. Their analysis is based on the study of female experience. They do not support the idea of adapting male models and theories. Rather, they seek a purely female model. Showalter asserts that like male writers, female writers too have their own tradition. She says that women's writing in the past was overlooked and undervalued by male critics. To make the literature of women different and special, there is a need of the reconstruction of its past. Thus, gynocritics rediscover the scores of women writers. Showalter has reconstructed the past of literary history of women by dividing the three stages of women writers. She traces different phases in the evolution of female tradition. The first one is the feminine phase, the second one is the feminist phase, the third one is the female phase. The feminine phase. Showalter sees the first phase taking place from roughly between 1840 to 1880. She calls this the feminine phase and declares that it is characterized by women writers in an effort to equal the intellectual achievements of the male culture. The distinguishing sign of this period is the male pseudonym. The women writers such as Bronte sisters, George Eliot and Elizabeth Gaskell belong to this phase. The writers followed the norms of men by internalizing the dominant male aesthetic standards. That is, they identified themselves with the male culture as women were not allowed to write. They wrote in male pseudonyms and their works dealt only with social and domestic background. They also exhibited a kind of sense of guilt or inferiority complex in their writing, and they accepted certain limitations in their writing as well. Thus, the feminist content of feminine is typically oblique or indirect, ironic and subversive. The feminist phase. The second phase follows from 1880 to 1920, and here women writers began to use literature to dramatize the ordeals of wrong womanhood. During this time between 1880 to 1920, the new women movement gained strength and women won the right to vote. This phase was characterized by women's writing that protested against male standards and advocated women's rights and autonomy. Writers like Elizabeth Robbins, Mrs. Fanny Trollope, and others protested against the male canons and values. It is also called as the period of separatist utopia because they rejected any text that stereotyped the women. They also developed a personal sense of injustice and wrote biases of male. The female phase. This phase covers the period between 1920 to the present day. In the female phase, women rejected both imitation and protest. Writers such as Rebecca West, Catherine Mansfield, Dorothy Richardson, and Virginia Woolf avoid both the imitation of the feminine writers and the protest of the feminist writers. They purely developed the idea of female writing and female experience. Here, women show more independent attitudes and realize the place of female experience in the process of art and literature. They differentiate female writing and male writing in terms of language. Their effort to identify and analyze the female experience leads them to this phase of self-discovery. Showalter's attempt is noteworthy in a sense that she wants to free women from the male-dominated literary tradition. According to Showalter, the task of feminist critics is to find a new language, a new way of reading that can integrate women's intelligence and experience, their reason and their suffering. Showalter rejects the heliocentric language and calls for the women's access to language so that women can develop a cultural model of their own writing. She thus calls women writers to express and interpret women's experiences distinctly and authentically. Thank you.